All right. Greetings, my fellow freedom lovers and sovereign thinkers. This is LL3's newest podcast. My name is Craig, and transmitting from the beautiful Land of Enchantment, which is also known as the state of New Mexico. And today's date, Wednesday, September 28th, 2016. So, interesting stuff has been happening. Now they had the disturbances that's going on in California. I think it's called El Region. It looks like a disturbance. It looks like another police shooting. So everyone's going to go up in arms and burn the neighborhoods down, which is completely irrelevant. And the question is, how many of them are actually live in that vicinity or community or municipality? That's the one thing you always gotta pay attention to, my friends, because they always want to have a lot of folks going out and bust them in, paying $50 just to go out there and protest. You know what I'm talking about, those particular corporate funded movements, I would say. That's how I look at it. And plus, controversy with Michael Savage getting kicked off the air due to some incident that he actually had a doctor on, talked about Hillary Clinton may have Parkinson's disease, and that was been addressed by some other sources as well. I know many of us believe that she is not in good health, and it wasn't the first time, because even George W. Bush fell on his head. He had a big head injury too, and he was still doing his thing. And if a lot of you folks recall, Ronald Reagan had Alzheimer's. I don't know if his wife Nancy was running the show in certain areas, but we always believed that George Herbert Walker Bush was calling all the shots. So just very disturbing, because one thing I can't stand when there's a war on journalism, radio, talk show hosts, and etc. It's the war on freedom. And that's one thing I despise. And so what happened was, of course, we talk about Hillary Clinton on her health again, and he gets off the air instantaneously, like he's the bad guy. And they got some bend over bobs on there that shows it's so crappy. So it's just one thing I always tell folks when it comes to free speech and your personal freedoms. I don't have to agree, but I will stand there side by side, fight for what's right. Because if it can affect him, they can affect yours. You have to think of it in unison. Support Michael Savage. Like him or not, he should have never been taken off the air. Doesn't matter if it's him, Rush Limbaugh, or even some of these boneheads like Chris Matthews, all right, which I'm not too crazy about him either. But that's the thing about free speech. No one's forcing you to listen to these shows. You can always turn it off. Remember, they're wants, not needs. So hopefully Mr. Savage will get back on his feet, do his own podcast show. If he could do it, that'd be great. Have his own website, just do a radio show, and he could get sponsors from that. That would be fantastic. He could tell those bastards to stick it. Those corporate scumbags that they are, that were trying to groom up a treasonous, one of the treasonous demonods, which y'all know, Hillary Clinton. I call her a treasonous demonod based on her actions. I didn't like her 24 years ago, and I don't care about her now. But I am digressing. So there's some interesting news here, which I really find incredibly great. Is the U.S. Senate overwhelmingly overrides Obama's veto to sue the Saudis and the 9/11 bill. This actually came from Johnny Liberty, and it says here, the U.S. Senate voted 97-1 to override President Barack Obama's veto on the bill that would allow Americans to potentially sue Saudi Arabia for 9/11. This was the first veto override during the Obama presidency. Senate Minority Leader Larry Reid, Democrat from Nevada, was the only one who sustained the veto, the Hill reported. Go figure. Larry Reid is nothing more than a tyrannical butt boy as far as I'm concerned. corrupt piece of garbage. That's right. It's nothing wrong how I talk to these politicians because that's the only language they can comprehend. Okay? Forgive me. Obama vetoed the bill last week, explaining that the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act, or JASTA as an acronym, would erode the doctrine of sovereign immunity and expose the U.S. to lawsuits around the world. Oh my goodness. He probably got that from the teleprompter, of course. The override vote was the single most embarrassing thing the Senate has done in over 2 decades. White House spokesman Josh Earnest told reporters Wednesday afternoon. Oh yeah, you had to use knee pads on that one, right, buddy? Another chump as usual, pissant. And I'm getting like a little bit some bit of vulgarity. So just sometimes passion gets in that way on principles. I always address myself with principles. It's how pathetic you got these douchebags in Washington, D.C. saying, you don't know what you're doing, but I'm up here. I am smarter than you. Yeah, just give me a peanut on a microphone for all I care. JASTA, which passed unanimously in both the House and the Senate, allows U.S. judges to waive sovereign immunity claims when dealing with acts of terrorism committed on American soil, potentially allowing lawsuits against Saudi Arabia over September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. 15 of the 9/11 hijackers were Saudi nationals. The issue appears to cross party lines, with Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, is pushing for a veto override of Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Bob Corker, Republican from Tennessee, is concerned it would end up exporting U.S. foreign policy to trial lawyers. Today is an important one for the widows and children of those murdered on 9/11. As always, I stand with them. JASTA. That's Charles Schumer. He's put on Twitter. And like I said, I am not in love with this guy. Okay, he's really one strange chap and had a lot of tyrannical attributes based on his actions. So let's go here. Okay, he did that, which is great. And like I said, I'm not crazy about him. And to proceed here, Defense Secretary Ashton Carter has argued that allowing JASTA to become law could lead U.S. being sued in foreign courts and subjected to an intrusive discovery process. Give me sympathy, opus wine. Yep, look at these bend over bobs. Good grief. This could put Washington in the difficult position of choosing between closing classified or otherwise sensitive information or suffering adverse rulings and potentially large damage awards for our refusal to do so, Carter wrote to House Armed Service Committee Chairman Mac Thornberry, Republican from Texas, earlier this week, according to the Military Times. There's links on here for folks to read it yourselves. But you know what? Another treasonous bend over Bob. All right, I'm going to just keep on going here. The House is expected to hold a veto override vote later on Wednesday, which happens. Yep. Okay, hopefully that will happen. Sources involved in JASTA tell me it might get a House vote to override the President of the United States veto in the House this p.m. as the Senate does the same this a.m. So all you folks out there, so call your Congress folks on this, okay? And it says here, source involved JASTA telling me it may get a House vote. Yeah, I already did ask Cameron Joseph. And if Obama veto is successfully overridden in the House, it would be the 111th time in U.S. history that this happened, and the first in Obama's presidential term. First ever veto override took place in March 1845 and involved President John Tyler's attempt to build military ships without approval of Congress. Andrew Johnson holds the record for most vetoes overwritten at 15, while Truman and Jimmy Carter are tied with second place with 12. Well, I think this is great news. I was very ecstatic, and I know many people in the 9/11 Truth movement loved it. It's like really broke the whole geopolitical perspective, create a huge dent. So I like to thank the U.S. Senate, even the ones I'm not too keen with, supported this bill, and I thank them for it. Doesn't mean we're going to be friends, but you got to do what's right. One thing for sure I could question, or maybe slightly critical, is they may let these lawsuits linger in a period of time. So expect that. Okay, but I'm going to have to reread the bills again, and I did it on my last episode. But so definitely check that out. And I'm going to continue on here with anti-war news. Says the same thing. Congress overwhelmingly overrides Obama's veto of 9/11 victims bills. Earlier today, Senate overwhelmingly voted 97 to 1 to override President Obama's veto on the 9/11 victims bill, the Justice Against Sponsored Terrorism Act, and after debate on what to call a VA clinic, the House followed suit in a 348-77 vote. This was the first override of Obama's presidency. JASTA will allow families of 9/11 victims to sue Saudi Arabia over its involvement in supporting the hijackers in the lead up to 9/11, as detailed in 28 pages. From the 9/11 report, Saudi officials have threatened to crash the U.S. Treasury market in retaliation for the bill. Both House and the Senate passed JASTA unanimously, and while Obama heavily lobbied after the veto, as the Saudi government, it ultimately didn't amount to very many lawmakers changing sides in the override votes which were both overwhelming. President Obama argued that JASTA was a dangerous precedent for American taxpayers, as other nations would reciprocate, setting up lawsuits against the U.S. government for its substantial misdeeds over the years, as well as for bankrolling foreign-armed factions that did such things. He added that since the U.S. is way more active overseas than anyone else, they are more at risk from this precedent. Defense Secretary Ash Carter is also lobbied against JASTA, warning it threatened the troops and that the lawsuits against Saudi Arabia might make public certain America's secrets that would harm national security. He did not elaborate what secrets the U.S. might have relevant to a bill regarding pre-9/11 planning. Well, I don't really give two craps what they say. So I think it's great. That's one thing I like about it. And according to this, it's very, very nice. Give the toast to all those folks that stuck to their guns. I think it's fantastic. And we have to do it again and again and again. And it looks like it is the most embarrassing thing in President Obama's career, which I never really cared for him because, like I said before, he's nothing more than a bend-over Bob to the New World Order. And not because of his skin color, but his actions, okay? And I am very ecstatic about it, so and we just got to keep on creating those dents, my friends, because the One World Order right now are really infuriated, and this is going to expect more infighting and start pointing the fingers at each other. If you read the 28 pages, Saudi government, it's criminal elements in the Saudi government and criminal elements in the United States government that covered it up. Can we say a conspiracy theory? Not anymore. It's a conspiracy fact. And even Rudy Giuliani cannot refute it. Okay, so-called America's mayor. So I'm going to hit another one here. It says here, it's from anti-war news, antiwar.com. And who wrote this? Let me see. Ooh. Yeah, Jason Ditz. Yep. Did it again. It says Defense Secretary, 9/11 victims bill could be devastating the military. With the veto override vote scheduled for Wednesday in the Senate, Defense Secretary Ash Carter is doing some last-minute public lobbying against Justice Against Sponsored Terrorism, or JASTA. And it came out yesterday, which previously passed unanimously in both House and the Senate. JASTA will allow the family of victims of 9/11 to sue Saudi Arabia for a role in supporting plotters in lead up to the attack. President Obama vetoed the bill Friday, claiming other nations could reciprocate. Yep, that's all it says right here. It's almost the same thing. Not really, but I'll continue on, okay? And that it would open taxpayers up to lawsuits for America's own misdeeds internationally. Well, you know what? Stop being a tyrannical empire, you bunch of scumbags. And so I'm going to continue on. Carter's opposition to JASTA took a different tack, arguing that a lawsuit against Saudi Arabia over 9/11 would lead to an intrusive discovery process and ultimately lead to the public disclosure of American secrets, potentially damaging the terror war. While it is keeping the administration's obsession to keep myriad secrets, after all, the 28 pages disclosure on Saudi Arabia involvement in 9/11 only became public in a heavily redacted form after a protracted effort. It also seems to amount to an admission that America has more secrets that would be relevant in the case against the Saudis. Yeah, I am not surprised about that at all. Exactly what that would be or even where it could be from, it's unclear, as while there were considerable redactions within the 28 pages, none of them gave the appearance of providing any U.S. ties to any of the pre-9/11 shenanigans. The Senate's votes will be Wednesday on the override, and assuming it passes, the House is expected to vote later in the week. The House was widely assumed to have votes, while the Senate is expected to be closer. This is like past tense, but what the hell? Through advocates in both parties have suggested they believe they could override the veto. Those wishing to contact, and it's been done. So, like I said, even Defense Secretary Ash Carter, another bend over Bob and proud. Absolutely. But too bad for that weasel. All right. Attributes of tyrannical weasels that are wearing no clothes, running around naked, couldn't even get a barrel. You know what? That's why I'm a little bit happy about it. And the folks out there, contact the House of Representatives, do it. Drive these bastards crazy, okay? Because they get what they deserve. Welcome to blowback. Tyranny doesn't pay. Deep down inside, I know I am right. And I'm not saying that out of arrogance, okay? All right, enough said of that. And I know many people have talked about talking about the debates and looking for their Lord and Savior in these, I call it evangelism, campaign evangelism. Oh, hallelujah, hallelujah. Of course, they're all trying to get their Savior. They worship in the seat, Oval Office, okay? It is by Dollar Vigilante, and he has his own perspective. It says here, Fascist Trump versus Communist Killary, battle on a sinking ship. I think that's pretty damn cool. I like that title. It says here, we watch and live tweeted at Dollar Vigilante the presidential debate last night, mostly because we were hoping Hillary would drop dead on live TV. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. What did happen was the two choices for the lesser evil this year came down to slightly more fascist Trump versus slightly more communist Clinton. But the key takeaway is neither candidate wants to change the system in any dramatic way. While they spoke about creating jobs, and no one pointed out that the government actually can't create jobs, it can only steal from some people and give to others, although Trump wins here with his idea of lowering corporate taxes. Hey! So, like I said, right there, there's some pros and cons, but it's called observant. While they spoke out about poor black neighborhoods, no one said that the war on drugs is the single biggest cause of problems in those communities, nor that the other biggest cause of problems in poor areas are the Federal Reserve and government regulations and growth impeding taxation. Nor did they seem to notice that the most dangerous areas all have the most restrictive gun control laws. All right, see? And they spoke about the threat of ISIS, but no one brought up that ISIS was created by the CIA and other Western intel facilities and is still funded and backed by the CIA, and certainly no one spoke of shutting down the CIA. Remember, I always say ISIS is New World Order funded. Yep, still say it till this day. Pretty damn consistent, but it's all good. I'm not saying I'm better than them. I just like to see things, so I look at things in the bigger picture, so but I will continue on here, and whoops, I hit the wrong button, forgive me. And I will continue on. They spoke about all the problems in the Middle East. Nearly all causes are funded by the U.S. government and CIA, and both had a solution: more war. Yes, I'm a peasant, but I feel free. Let's go to war for to fight to secure the democracy. Flush down the toilet. The fact the only way the U.S. government can make America great again would be shut down, would be to shut down immediately, and neither candidate would ever conceive of the notion. Aside from all being a bizarre circus, there is nothing truly new with either candidate, and we will continue just as the elites intend. Here at TDV, which is the Dollar Vigilante, we have said for over a year that Hillary Clinton will win come November if she can keep walking. And this debate never changed our opinion. Presidential elections aren't really elections so much as selections anyway. George Soros, a high-level employee of the elite, has already said Hillary Clinton's going to win the popular vote by a landslide. Here's his full quote. I think it all is going to be a landslide for Hillary Clinton in the popular vote, not an electoral vote, because their paid political announcements would have a big role, and so the electoral thing will be closer. But the popular vote will be a landslide because she is campaigning for the general elections, where the Republicans are fighting for the primary. That's from Jorge Soros, the Jorge, okay? One who sells himself. That's Jorge Soros for you. The Hungarian Gino, which it means Jew in name only, and I'm not being anti-Semitic, okay? One big reason for Hillary win is because of the funding that keeps pouring in, and that funding is based on her obvious stated determination to make more wars around the world, which the military-industrial complex is eager to do. That's why Hillary is receiving so much funding from corporate America. Trump has hurried to say, as a result, that he is too eager to confront terrorism abroad as well. National security seems to be a big issue for these two. Less so, the nearly $20 trillion U.S. debt, which is the fast sinking the country, yet the national debt received only a few minutes of conversation as opposed to nearly 15 minutes on Barack Obama's birth certificate. A few days ago, the federal debt of the U.S. passed the $19.5 trillion mark, in fact, for the 2016 fiscal year that ends on the eve of the Jubilee year. The U.S. government's debt grows to $1.36 trillion, will be the third biggest annual increase ever. And there's a graph for that from 1900 to 2020 on this debt. All right. This is the only chart needed as a debate last night, and the only question that should have been posed. What are you going to do about that? Unfortunately, the reason that question was not asked is because there's absolutely nothing anyone can do at this point. When the $20 trillion debt and over $80 trillions in liabilities, money already spent, but that is promised to be paid in the future is accounted for. It adds up for over $250,000 for every man, woman, and child in the U.S. One more than $1 million for every family of four. That is mainly what all the billionaires who have been running from the stock market and into gold the last few months have been alluding to. It's a rock in the hard place. Rock and the hard place. Take your pick. When it implodes, well, they'll call it a debt jubilee. It will bring on a crisis and crash that Jim Rogers, who founded the Quantum Fund with George Soros, warned us about in August. He issued a blunt statement that $68 trillion biblical collapse is poised to wipe out millions of Americans. We aren't talking decades either. At best, we are talking a few years. Even it could even begin to happen as soon as next week when the Chinese yuan is added to the IMF's SDR basket the day before the end of the Jubilee year. We've been telling you for years to prepare, and those preparations also have to include massive gains, including 200% gain in the TDV Premium's newsletter portfolio last year. It is not too late, But if you've done nothing to prepare yet, you are really leaving things to the last proverbial minute. Last summer, we made a call just before the August crash that earned us 4,500% in 3 days. And TDV's senior analyst has just made a similar call again in the September 16th alert to premium subscribers. And you can access that immediately here. While we certainly favor Donald Trump's stance versus Hillary on many things, especially in regards to reducing taxes and regulation, what should be both reduced to zero, it's already too late. Before anything can be salvaged, there's going to have to be a washing away of sorts, likely in the form of a debt jubilee, which will cause damage to the economy, financial, and monetary systems that no one could possibly imagine. It's possible that it won't happen next week. It may not happen next month, but it will happen soon enough. If you aren't preparing for it, you may already be too late. And one thing is clear, neither Donald nor Hillary are going to be able to salvage it. And that is true. So, and even like I said, whoever wins, and this happens, they're just patsies. And I'm one of the individuals, I wasn't really too keen with even Donald Trump in a lot of areas. He's entertaining, yes, he's an entertainer. But sometimes he digresses, he gets too defensive, and I know about the whole Lester Holt thing. Some people, oh, he did everything right, and other people, like he was like attacking him or trying to throw more stuff at him. Be a mediator, okay, not a dictator, okay. So that's how I look at it. And the truth of the matter is, I told folks this about, oh, well, she's not a communist, and they all tried to defend Trump. I'm like, listen. If you heard the rhetoric, especially from the first debate, they are anti-freedom candidates. That's how I see it. Gotta watch it. I recommend you watch the debates again and listen to those subjects. And now I'm gonna really talk about the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. Like Hillary Clinton, okay, yeah, she's against the whole stop and frisk, but Donald Trump's for it, and they both support no fly, no gun buy. If you're on the no fly list, you can't buy. You're done you can't own a firearm if you're a suspected terrorist. Okay, without due process. Right there, they are not freedom friendly. They are anti-Bill of Rights. It says government keep out. They want government transgress. We want to do it. Always got to look at those things, my friends. And I'm glad I have. And I'm not saying I'm better than you or anything like that. I'm still learning. I'm learning every day. You should too. All right. This is like an archive. Came out like 13 days ago. I think it was the 15th. ImportantNews.com is by Michael Snyder, and I should have got this done a while back. It says 10 things that every American should know about Donald Trump to save the U.S. economy. And it says here, can Donald Trump turn the economy around? The U.S. economy around? This week, Trump unveiled details of his new economic plan, and the mainstream media is having a field day criticizing it. But the truth is that we simply cannot afford to stay on the same path that Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and the Democrats have us on right now. Millions of jobs are being shipped out of the country. Middle America is dying. Poverty is exploding. Millions of children in America don't have enough food, and our reckless spending has created the biggest debt bubble in the history of the planet. Something must be done, or else we will continue to steamroll toward economic oblivion. So is Donald Trump the man up for the hour? If you'd like to read his full economic plan, you can find it on his official campaign website, which is a link for that. His plan starts off by pointing out this has been the weakest economic recovery since the Great Depression. Last week's GDP report showed that the economy grew a mere 1.2% in the second quarter and 1.2% over the last year. It's the weakest recovery since the Great Depression, the predictable consequence of massive taxation, regulation, on one side trade deals, and onerous energy restrictions. And Trump is exactly right about how weak this economic recovery has been. So, how he fix things. The following are the 10 things that every American should know about Donald Trump's plan to save the U.S. economy. 1. Donald Trump would lower tax on the middle class. Tax savings under Trump's plan would actually be quite substantial for middle-class families. The following numbers come from a recent Charisma article. A married couple earning $50,000 per year with 2 children and $8,000 in child expenses will save 35% on their current tax bill. A married couple earning $75,000 per year with 2 children and $10,000 in child care expenses will receive 30% reduction in their tax bill. A married couple earning $5 million per year with 2 children and $12,000 in child care expenses will get only 3% reduction on their tax bill. Well, I just say just get rid of the whole tax system, right? Unconstitutional as far as I'm concerned. 2. Donald Trump would lower taxes on businesses. Under his plan, no business in America will pay more than 15%. Alternatively, Hillary Clinton's plan would tax some small businesses at a rate close to 50%. So Trump's plan would undoubtedly be good for business and would encourage many that left the country to return. But where would the lost tax revenue be made up? Good question. 3. Child care expenses would be exempt from taxation. For working families with children, this would be a great blessing. Without a doubt, there's an effort to win over more working women, and this is a demographic that Trump has been struggling with. It is definitely an idea that I support, but once again, where will the money come from to pay for this? 4. U.S. manufacturers will be allowed to immediately fully expand new plants and equipment. This would undoubtedly lead to a boom in the capital investment, but it would also reduce tax revenue. As an emergency measure, this would be very good for encouraging manufacturers to stay in America, but it would also likely increase the budget deficit. 5. Temporary freeze on new regulations. Red tape is one of my big pet peeves, and so I greatly applaud Trump for this proposal. I think that Bob Eschliman put it very well when he wrote the following about Trump's planned freeze on new regulations. In 2015 alone, federal agencies issued over 3,300 final rules and regulations, up from 2,400 the prior year. Studies show that small manufacturers face more than 3 times the burden of the average U.S. business, and the hidden tax from ineffective regulations amount to nearly $15,000 per U.S. household annually. Excessive regulation is costing our country as much as $2 trillion per year, and Trump will end it. 6. All existing regulations would be reviewed and unnecessary regulations would be eliminated. In particular, Trump's plan will focus on getting rid of regulations that inhibited hiring. The following are some of the specific areas he identifies on his official campaign website. You can look it up yourself. The Environmental Protection Agency's Clean Power Plan, which forced investments in renewable energy at the expense of coal and natural gas, raising electricity rates. The EPA's Waters of the United States rules, which give the EPA the ability to regulate the small streams on private land, limiting land use, and the Department of Interior's moratorium on coal mining permits, which put tens of thousands of coal miners out of work. Which that's true. Too much regulation. It's a form of like neo-mercantilism, I would say, an economic neo-mercantilism. So I will continue on here. 7. Donald Trump would fundamentally alter our trade relations with the rest of the globe. Donald Trump is the first major party nominee in decades to recognize that our trade deficit is absolutely killing our economy. I write about this all the time, and it is a hot button issue for me, so I definitely applaud Trump for proposing the following. Appoint trade negotiators whose goal will be to win for America, narrowing our trade deficit, increasing domestic production, and getting a fair deal for our workers. He wants to renegotiate NAFTA. I say exterminate it. Withdraw from the TPP. I agree on that. Bring trade relief cases to the World Trade Organization. I say we need to get the hell out of it. So the things I agree, I disagree. And of course, label China a currency manipulator. I would say, how about the World Bank and the IMF? Apply tariffs and duties to countries that cheat. Direct the Commerce Department to use all legal tools to respond to trade violations. 8. Donald Trump's plan would be a tremendous boost for the U.S. energy industry. Barack Obama promised to kill the coal industry, and that is one of the few promises that he has actually kept. Also, Obama killed the Keystone Pipeline, and right now the energy industry as a whole is enduring the worst stretch since the last recession. To turn things around, Trump will do the following: rescind all the job-destroying Obama executive actions, including the Climate Action Plan and the Waters of the U.S. Rule. And here's another. I could say this: all the states could tell these executive orders up to stick it. It's called the 10th Amendment. All right. So you have the coal industry and other industries threatened by Hillary Clinton's extremist agenda. Ask TransCanada to renew its permit application for the Keystone Pipeline. There's a lot of controversy on that, but we'll continue on. Make land in the outer continental shelf available to produce oil and natural gas. Cancel the Paris Climate Agreement limiting global warming to 2 degrees Celsius. Stop all payments of U.S. tax dollars to UN global warming programs. I say we need to get the hell out of the UN. Yeah. 9. Trump will repeal Obamacare. Trump claimed that Obamacare will cost our economy 2 million jobs over the next 10 years, and that, without a doubt, it has already cost the U.S. economy a lot of jobs. Not only that, but Obamacare has also sent insurance premiums soaring, and that is putting a tremendous amount of financial pressure on many families. Trump said that he will replace Obamacare, but that is a rather vague statement. What exactly will he replace it with? I'll say this to Donald Trump: you want to get the healthcare system better? Endorse on terminating the Affordable Care Act, and many states need to do the same thing. Plus, if the HMO Act of 1973, which is the Health Maintenance Organization Act, which President Nixon signed into law in 1973, of course, that needs to get exterminated as well. Okay? And 10, Trump's plan says nothing about the Federal Reserve. It is a great concern because the Federal Reserve has far more power over the economy than anyone else does. It is at the very heart of our debt-based system, and unless something is done about the Fed, our debt bubble will continue to get even larger. Since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, the value of the U.S. dollar has fallen by more than 96%, and our debt has gotten more than 5,000 times larger. For Trump to not even mention the Federal Reserve in his economic plan is a tremendous oversight. We're in the midst of a long-term economic deadline, and things have not gotten better during the Obama years. If you can believe it, a study has just been released by Harvard. Even acknowledge this: America's economic performance peaked in the late 1990s, and erosion in crucial economic indicators, such as the rate of economic growth, productivity growth, job growth, and investment, began well before the Great Recession. Workforce participation, the portion of Americans in the productive workforce, peaked in 1997, with fewer working-age men and women in the workforce. Per capita income for the U.S. is reduced. Median real household income has declined since 1999, with income stagnating virtually all income levels. Despite a welcome jump in 2015, median household income remains below the peak attained in 1999, 17 years ago. Moreover, stagnating income and limited job prospects have disproportionately affected lower income and lower skilled Americans, leading inequality to rise. That same study found that the percentage of Americans participating in the labor force peaked back in 1997 and has been steadily declining since that time. And there's a chart for that too. If we continue to do the same things, we will continue to get the same results. Donald Trump is promising change, and many of his proposals sound good, but there are also some areas to be concerned about. Ultimately, just tinkering with the tax code and reducing regulations is not going to be enough to turn the U.S. economy around. We need fundamental overhaul of our economy and financial systems, and Trump's plan stops well short of that. But without a doubt, what he's proposing is vastly superior to Hillary Clinton's plan, and she should definitely be appalled it for at least moving. He should definitely be applauded for at least moving in the right direction. So in those areas, yeah, it sounds good. There's some cons in there, and I do agree with the Federal Reserve. They are a great enemy, okay? And people are afraid to talk about the banks. At least Ron Paul and even Dennis Kucinich, former Congressman Dennis Kucinich, Democrat from Ohio, Cleveland, I think it's the Cleveland area, questioned it and said it was an illegal entity. So, I guess I said I'm not crazy about Trump, but those areas sound good. But if he gets in, how is it gonna be pursued? That's the question. Because he's got to go by Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution on his duties. Congress has to make these rules. But what you can do too, in certain areas, like the Affordable Care Act, which is called Obamacare, states got to start nullifying, which they can. And if they say, "Oh, you can't do that," yes, you can. And you don't need Fox. I don't need to listen to Fox News to put that out there. One moment here. So, like I said, even though it came out since the 15th of September, but like I said, it has its pros and cons. But the question is it? Well, actions have to speak louder than words. And I'm not going to be ranting on here, but Mike Snyder, he has some good stuff. Check it out and observe responsibly, like I say. All right, well, we'll yawn there for a moment. I'll be right back. Chill. All right, so the next little thing here, this came from The Guardian, came out today. This here IMF study warns free trade seen as benefiting only a fortunate few. It's from Larry Elliott. The International Monetary Fund has warned that the free trade is increasingly seen as benefiting only the well-off and that help isn't needed for those job prospects that have been damaged by globalization. This is by the IMF? That's interesting. What the hell's going on? What's been going on? They try and they're getting their escaping from bizarro world now in order to push fresh momentum behind removing barriers to international commerce. In the chapter from a half-yearly World Economic Outlook study released ahead of its annual meeting next week, the IMF said the weakness of the global economy, rather than a wave of protectionism, has been largely responsible for the sharp slowdown in the trade growth over the past 4 years. But it said the uptick to protectionist measures since the financial crisis had not been innocuous, and stressed that anti-trade sentiment couldn't harden. The IMF noted that there has been studies showing significant and long-lasting adjustment costs for those whose job opportunities have been impaired by the structural changes associated with the trend, even if the lower prices generated by globalization helped those on low incomes. An increasingly popular narrative that sees the benefits of globalization and trade accrue only to a fortunate few is also gaining traction, the IMF study said. Policymakers need to address the concerns of trade-affected workers, including through effective support for retraining, skill building, and occupational and geographic mobility to mitigate the downsides of further trade interrogation for the trade agenda to revive. The IMF said global trade has grown by just over 3% per year since 2012, less than half of the average rate of expansion during the previous 3 decades. The slowdown in trade growth is remarkable, especially when set against the historical relationship between growth in trade and global economic activity. Between 1985 and 2007, the real-world trade grew on average twice as fast as global GDP, whereas over the past 4 years, it has barely kept pace. So such prolonged sluggish growth in trade volumes relative to economic activity has a few historical precedents during the past 5 decades. Calls for greater protectionism have featured in the U.S. presidential race, but the IMF said three-quarters of the decline in trade growth since 2012 relative to 2003 to 2007, 4 years prior to the global crisis, was a result of weaker economic activity and in particular subdued investment growth. However, it said other factors, including the lack of new trade deals, has also shaved 1.75 percentage points off trade growth. The pace of new trade policies initiative at the global level has slowed mobility. At the same time, the uptick in protectionism since the global financial crisis is not innocuous. While the quantitative contribution of trade policies to slow down the trade growth has been limited so far, protectionist measures could significantly weigh on the global trade if they become more widespread. In a separate chapter, the IMF said there were signs that the anti-deflation policies being pursued by central banks around the world were becoming less effective and urged a broader mix of actions to increase demand. Given the broad-based nature of this disinflation and the corresponding fact that many countries are erasing monetary policy at the same time, dampening the downward pressure that monetary policy easing exerts on the exchange rate, monetary policy stimulus is on its way may not be sufficient to keep medium-term inflation expectations anchored at central bank targets. A comprehensive package consisting of more growth-friendly composition of fiscal policy, an expansionary fiscal stance where fiscal space is available, demand supportive structural reforms, and measures aimed at addressing weaknesses in bank and corporate balance sheets should play a complementary role in mitigating risk to protracted weak demand and low inflation. Yeah, so at least I gotta say, I'm not a fan keen of the IMF, but you got folks that have a conscience, so and there's even these particular entities, and I have to agree, globalization is killing the economy worldwide. A lot of us been talking about this for years, and you can't blame capitalism, man. That's totally irrelevant. As far as I'm concerned, we got to get out of the countries need to get out of these organizations and start doing agreements with the nations alone without these global entities, World Trade Organization, all that, and get rid of central banking systems. You have to really see that to understand where I'm coming from, and so that's how I look at it. Of course, the bureaucracy and over-regulations, that don't even help too. So I said, like the last article I read, Trump has some good points, but it doesn't mean how it's going to be guaranteed. So you always got to look at the bigger picture. And I'm going to continue on here. Came from the New American. It came out yesterday. It says, Washington Mall shooting. Answer, not country control, but armed populace. Friday evening, in the town of Burlington, Washington, the gunman walked into a Macy's at a Cascade Mall and opened fire. The shooting lasted a mere 60 seconds and left 5 people dead. This is the mall is 65 miles north of Seattle, and it sits directly against the state's major north-south corridor, I-5. The word of the shooting spread quickly throughout Burlington, a town approximately 8,500 people, and had residents ill at ease as news spread through the neighboring town of Mount Vernon. Sam Price of Burlington, owners of Larry's Auto and Truck Parts of Burlington, a business less than 1 mile from the Macy's door, told a New American, "My initial reaction was obviously a concern for the entire community as the gunman was on the loose and prayers for the families of the victims." It wasn't long after the news shooting came through that police and officials were canvassing my entire neighborhood at home. News reports had him possibly coming down directly into our area, so everyone was on a complete lockdown. More lockdowns. New American also interviewed Rob Farrell, owner of Farrell's Auto Wrecking in Mount Vernon, mere 3 miles away, who stated, "At first there was sporadic information and we really didn't know much. My kids were at a football game at a high school just down the street from the mall. We originally thought it might just be some sort of drive-by shooting, but we called our kids and told them maybe they should come home just in case. We originally had dinner plans in town, but after the news, decided to just go to a quick drive-through before our kids could even leave the game to head home. The school officials announced over the loudspeaker that were reports saying the gunman was heading in the direction of the school. They took everyone into the high school gymnasium and had a lockdown. No kids were allowed to leave until their parents arrived and personally picked them up. For something like that to happen in our small community was definitely unsettling. After examining surveillance videos from the Burlington Mall, the connecting a specific car and license plate to the shooter, 20-year-old Arkin Seton, Skagit County authorities alerted the Island County Sheriff's Office, and the suspect was apprehended without incident around 6:30 p.m. Saturday evening, one day after the shooting. He was taken into custody approximately 28 miles from the mall in Burlington, near his apartment in Oak Harbor, Washington, home to Whidbey Island Naval Air Station. Interesting, huh? Details of sighting in his background are still sparse, but some information is known. While initials, eyewitness reports suggested the shooter might be Hispanic. Seton's family is actually of Turkish descent. His father met his mother in Turkey, and family immigrated from there to the United States when he was a young child. Seton's status is not that of a citizen, but rather a legal resident of the United States. According to reports by KIRO7 News in Seattle, Arkin Seton has a previous encounter with the law, including a 2015 misdemeanor fourth-degree assault case in Island County, where she was ordered to undergo a mental health evaluation. Though there were reports of Seton using cannabis during the course of his mental health evaluation. A court ordered to abstain from alcohol, and drug use. Multiple accusations of having groped girls at a high school he attended in Oak Harbor. Accusations of having sent an unsolicited photo of his crotch to a 21-year-old neighbor. Speaking to the Associated Press, Amber Cathy, the neighbor to whom he allegedly sent a photograph of his crotch, said he would deliberately change the route to her apartment to avoid his proximity when his car was in the parking lot. Similar sentiments were echoed by multiple others who had contacted Seton throughout his teen and high school years. The 5 victims who were murdered by Seton at the Cascade Mall are Sari Lara, the youngest victim at just 16 years, a sophomore at Mount Vernon High School. Laura was a cancer survivor and has been described by her mother as a happy, responsible, and driven student. Belinda Gauld, 64-year-old, and her mother said to be in her 90s. Chuck Egan, maintenance worker for Boeing. Egan and his wife were in Macy's after having dinner at the mall when the shooting began. They started to run. When his wife stumbled, he stooped over. He stooped to help her up and was shot. Shayla Martin, 52-year-old makeup artist from Mount Vernon. Martin's sister described her as an avid reader who was both classy and practical. Bail has been sent at $2 million for Seton, who has been charged with 5 counts of premeditated murder. Seton's stepfather has described his stepson as suffering from anxiety and depression, mental health issues for which he had undergone court mandate counseling. It was warned that this guy was on psychotropic drugs. While families of the victim in the Burlington and Mount Vernon community struggle to make sense of such senseless violence, one B-list Hollywood celebrity has already issued a snarky comment on social media via Twitter account. On actor Will Wheaton stated, "Welcome to America. It's been 0 days since our last shooting. F the NRA. Dumb, 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 dumb." Go figure. Church of Hollywood, right? Be Hollywood. Ignoring the obvious mental illness from which Seton was suffering, people such as Wheaton are quick to lay blame before the shooting the door to Second Amendment supporters and groups such as the NRA. Why they completely discount is that in addition to the court orders to abstain from drugs and alcohol, Seton had also been barred by a judge from owning or possessing a firearm. Kinda, sort of, it's the only way. Kinda, sort of, will get us through the day. That's right, Wheaton. Hopefully you get this. It was already illegal for Arkin Seton to have a weapon. Additional gun control laws would have been moot in a scenario where Seton committed such a heinous act without regarding for human life. In the wake of the shooting at Umpqua Community College near Roseburg, Oregon, on October 1st, 2015, senior fellow at the Harvard Institution, Thomas Sowell, wrote the column "The Gun Control Farce," published at the New American and elsewhere. Said Sowell, President Obama's intrusion into the mourning community of Roseburg, Oregon, in order to promote his political crusade for stronger gun control laws is part of a pattern of his using various other sites of shooting rampages in the past to promote this long-standing crusade to the political left. The zealotry of gun control advocates makes some sense if they had a serious evidence that more restrictive gun control laws actually reduce gun crimes, but they seldom even discuss the issues in terms of empirical evidence. Saving lives is serious business. But claiming to be saving lives and refusing to deal with evidence is a farce. Nor the Second Amendment or the National Rifle Association the real issue, despite how much the media and the intelligentsia focus on them. As the communities of Burlington and Mount Vernon, Washington mourn the lives of those lost last Friday, they need the thoughts and prayers of their friends, loved ones, and community and nation. What is not needed is politicians and Hollywood personalities pointing fingers at the NRA in an obvious attempt to further curb the Second Amendment, actions which will leave good citizens further defenseless and do nothing to curb the violent acts by those such as Arkin Seton. So it says right there, you blame Arkin Seton, not the Second Amendment. Okay? That's how you see it. And he was on these mental, psychological values. I'm just curious what kind of psychotropic drugs he was consuming. Big Pharma don't wanna hear it, but I say piss on him because this is what's been going on. A lot of these mass shootings, many of them were on psychotropic drugs. And even there's some cases, like there was a claim about Omar Mateen or someone that actually the shooter was a victim of Project Orion. Sniff something and he's like, tell him what to do, and boom, without questioning, robotic. I mean, we may have to look at Cascade Mall as a firearm-free zone. Is that the question? Yeah, it's possible. But the whole thing is this, my friends. It's the person, never the weapon. And right there, you got politicians and so forth that want to exploit it. It doesn't work. It always backfires. People are waking up, believe it or not. And people in those areas, like I said, I agree. Put your thoughts and prayers on the victim families and hope justice will prevail. All right. This one here, here from Foreign Policy, is titled "Russia is in Tailspin Over MH17 Shootdown Report." It is by Katia Sarana. A new Dutch-led investigation of the 2014 deadly shootdown of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 in the separatist-held area of Ukraine corroborates, which was already widely documented. A Russian Buk missile system caused the crash. Prosecutors stopped short of directly blaming Moscow, which has denied involvement, but for officials in Kyiv and elsewhere, Wednesday's findings confirm Russia's hand is in the ongoing conflict, and it follows up attempts to muddy the investigation of the crash that killed 298. Moscow's spin machine quickly took flight after the inquiry's report became public, calling the investigation biased and politically motivated and pointed the finger right back at Ukraine. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said Ukraine's role in the joint investigation team gave it an opportunity to falsify evidence and have the case developed to its advantage, yet even if she acknowledged how far-fetched the theory seems, it sounds like a cruel joke, she said. To this day, the investigators continue to ignore the overwhelming evidence provided by the Russian side, despite the fact that Russia is the only side that submits accurate information and constantly discloses new data. Zakharova said, Russian Buk manufactured Almaz also have a live press conference to dispute the investigation's version of events, with its own report arguing the multinational team has distorted evidence to implicate Moscow. The Dutch-led investigation found that the Buk missile was launched from outside Pervo Moscow, a rebel-held pro-Russian area in eastern Ukraine, but Mikhail Malashevsky, an advisor at Almaz Anti, said that evidence did not match the real damage. Instead, he said the three experiments by the company showed that Buk was more likely launched from a Kyiv-controlled area. He also added the missile launch could have been a mistake. The latest round of theories builds upon the past disinformation campaigns by the Kremlin, including the floating idea that the CIA tried to frame Russia by filling a drone airliner with bodies and crashing it, or the theory that the Ukrainians themselves made a mistake when trying to shoot down Russian President Vladimir Putin's airplane. The results of the latest investigation support U.S. intelligence analysts and the work of the website Bellingcat.com, which has been investigating the crash and posting evidence alleging Russian involvement for 2 years. The website, run by citizen journals, was a target for a hacking takedown in 2015. Wednesday, a report that Threat Connect found the hack jobs were perpetrated by Cyberburek, a Ukrainian hacking group suspected to having ties to the Kremlin. The group infiltrated and defaced Bellingcat's website and hacked into the accounts of a Moscow-based Bellingcat researcher, posting his personal details online, including his personal passport scan, and personal pictures. If Russia is willing to go to these lengths to compromise a small journalist organization and its contributors, consider what they are willing to do major news and media outlets that publish similar articles, Threat Connect report warned. Well, it's going to be the hot potato game. Who is actually going to be at fault? So, it says Russia, somebody says Ukraine. We don't know, but it's very interesting. You got to look at everything across the board. It's a shame because 290 people got killed. But I'll tell you one thing, when it's a really official, has memorable evidence, hell is going to break loose financially, whoever's involved. And it's a shame, but justice got to be done for those folks too. All right, next one here came from the activist post. It says here, beginning. Ooh, sorry about that. I get something, be right back. Okay, cool. I'm just going to continue on here. This is from Activist Post. This is titled, beginning October 1st, North Carolina police can block release of camera footage. By Derek Brose. A new North Carolina law will make it hard for the public to acquire police dash cameras and body camera footage. North Carolina has been the scene of recent rises of protests and public calls for accountability in the police shooting Keith Lamont Scott. After initially fighting the release of body camera footage, Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Chief Kerr Putney reluctantly allowed the public to see the shooting with their own eyes. Beginning October 1st, Chief Putney and other North Carolina law enforcement will now be legally be able to deny public access to body camera and dash cam footage. North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory signed a bill 2 months ago that would limit public access to police footage. The law has been supported by North Carolina Sheriff's Association. Governor McCrory argues the bill will respect the constitutional rights of officers. Currently, dash cameras footage from the police vehicle and body camera footage are public record and available via public record request. However, beginning October 1st, the law will state that the release of police footage will now depend solely on law enforcement. If requests for footage are denied by law enforcement, an appeal could be made for a judge. Yeah, more money out of your wallet, right? Obviously, this does not bode well for police accountability activists who typically seek make such footage public following altercations or shootings. North Carolina police are likely to deny any footage that would incriminate an officer or upset the public. A focus on public abuse and an increase in citizen recordings of police encounters has created a situation where law enforcement are often resistant to releasing their videos. The growth of body cameras has also caused a patchwork of rules and regulations related to the release of body cam footage. CNN reports that at least 19 states and the District of Columbia have passed laws on public access to police body camera footage, according to Reporters Committee for the Freedom of the Press and National Conference of State Legislators. North Carolina is the only latest example of the law enforcement working to limit transparency and accountability. This is why it's important to remember that the fight against police violence and abuse should not simply be about requiring police to wear cameras. The goal should not be reformist, but the complete eradication of systematic violence and the public acceptance of such violence. Be it by creating and promoting alternatives to traditional policing, we can create something much more powerful and responsible to our communities. We have to go further than body cameras and remove ourselves from the system of taxation that allows the police, who are themselves the enforcement arm of the state, to continue to function and thrive despite continuing to abuse and violate the people that they're sworn to protect. We can remove ourselves from this matrix and build a better world that's not based on theft and violence. We can create a world where the police, as we know them today, are no longer necessary. And when you look at it, it is, to an extent, Mr. Bros is right. And it is pretty disturbing because I know there's public access and public information. And now it says here about constitutional rights of officers. Well, how about the constitutional rights of the people of North Carolina? They don't count? Something to really look at. And just more stuff. So, and what's interesting about that is because there's an area of access to public records in North Carolina, and it says here you have a statutory right to inspect a vast number of North Carolina public records using the state's public records law. See Chapter 132, Section 1B of the North Carolina General Statute, saying that public records are the property of the people. And let's just read that for a moment. And it says here about public records defined in subsection A, it's 130 statute 132-1. Public record or public records shall mean all documents, papers, letters, maps, books, photography, films, sound recordings, magnetic or other tapes, electronic data processing records, artifacts, or other documentary material, regardless of physical form or characteristics, made or received pursuant to law or ordinance in connection with the transaction of public businesses by an agency of North Carolina government or subdivisions. Agency of North Carolina government or subdivision shall mean and include every public office, public officer or official, state or local elected or appointed institution, board, commission, bureau, council, department, authority, or other unit of the government, state of or of any county, unit, special district, or other political subdivision of government. So they're gonna be so now this so-called new law has been compromised, okay, which can violate that. So I just find it's pretty damn ludicrous, not just the freedom of the press, but the right to information. So I'm gonna add that link in there on public records, which is Digital Media Law Project. So technically, they got to try to get all that out, and exemptions they could likely be using there as well, which is criminal investigation records and all that. They could be exempt. So they got to try to add it in there, like an agency may refuse disclosure of the requested records if one or more of the following statutory exemptions applies, and it's a criminal investigation record. So technically, that could be considered a criminal investigation record. But photographs and recordings of autopsies, okay, I have it exempt there as well. So I'm going to add that to the memo, and you can put that link on there on Chapter 132, Section 1B. Okay, definitely check that out. Very contradicting. So you can really look at this yourselves, and the link will be right there. But I think it's a real damn shame to an extent, because that's why I tell folks, and even everyone else, photography is not a crime. Use those body cameras on them. So that's how you gotta do it. You gotta be more strategic and more Sun Tzu. And the fact is, natural born rights, even in North Carolina, is constitutional. They need us more, we need them. You have to have that mindset. All right, and I'm going to proceed here. It's from the Current.com, Harvard Current, and it says here, librarians stand against FBI overreach. I got this from the EFF, which is Electronic Frontier Foundation. It says here, we are the four librarians who fought a government gag order a decade ago when FBI agents demanded library records under the Patriot Act and told us under the penalty of criminal prosecution that we couldn't talk about it. Yeah, they could stick it up their ass. I'm getting a little bit vulgar here. Good grief. We members of what the media call the Connecticut Four. We haven't reunited in a civil liberties case cause until now. Attempts are being made in the U.S. Senate to expand the amount of kind of information that the government may compel libraries and others to divulge. This could be once again infringe on the civil liberties of library patrons and silence librarians as we were silent a dozen years ago. What happened then is a federal criminal offense to discuss this matter with anyone. Don't you understand? That's what the FBI agent said to George Christian, then and now the executive order of library connection. In 2005, when they handed him a so-called national security letter, the letter demanded that libraries and our network identify patrons who had used library computers online at a specific time 1 year earlier. All the patrons who used the computers could be under suspicion without their knowledge. Intrusion into their freedom to research was completely unwarranted in all senses of that word, because no judge had determined it was necessary. Sadly, both the national security letter and the gag order that went with it were entirely legal under the then new Patriot Act, hastily passed by Congress in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, but that doesn't mean they were right. Thank you. As a result, the members of the Library Connections Executive Committee at the time served as plaintiffs in a lawsuit challenging the legality of the request. The American Civil Liberties Union defended us, of course, because none of us want to go to jail for violating the gag order. All the other names to be listed as John Doe or Jane Doe. A year later, government withdrew its demand for information as well as its gag order. We could talk about what happened. This was a win for civil liberties. In the 10 years since then, we have spoken out individually against the excesses of the Patriot Act many times, most recently in support of the modest but landmark Patriot Act reforms enacted by Congress last year. But some senators are angling to increase surveillance authority. This past summer, the Senate barely defeated legislation that would have expanded the FBI's authority to collect information by using national security letters that could gag librarians and others without a court order. Legislation was attached as an amendment to the Justice Department spending bill. Yeah, they're always going to put crap in there, in finance bills. It happens all the time. Senators could try again at any time, including tacking legislation onto the government funding bill that has to pass this week to avoid a shutdown. The new threat. This expanded authority would expose the content of patron communications made through library computers. It would, however, force us librarians to give the FBI other potentially revealing transaction records, such as the top-level internet domains visited by a patron, links clicked on by a patron to access another website email metadata, such as times an email was sent, it is the size, it is the type of attachment, and maybe it's even its subject line and the time and length of an interest search session. This would take the Patriot Act authority exactly in the wrong direction. It is a position that ungagged and we're proud to take together once again, this time with our real names attached. This Peter Chase is retired from the Plainville Public Library. Barbara Bailey is the director of the Wells Turner Memorial Library in Glastonbury. Jan Nowak is the director of the Portland Public Library. George Christian is the executive order of the Library Connection, a nonprofit cooperative of 30 libraries. And I could thank them for standing for what's right, because this whole thing with the Patriot Act and the gag order and all that is illegal, null and void, no excuses. And they want to use September 11th as a 24/7 excuse for everything. Like I said before, you want to fight the real war on terror? Exercise and defend our Bill of Rights culture. That's it. So give them the thumbs up for the Connecticut Four. Homage to them. Saying, all right, next one here came from the Free Project, again, by Claire Burnish. And it came out, I believe it came out today. It says, conspiracy theorists were right. Congress to expand in other forms of travel like bus and train. No one's favorite government agency, the U.S. Department of Transportation, U.S. Transportation Security Administration, will be harassing innocent travelers on buses and trains if new legislation unsurprisingly passed, proposed after rather questionable attacks in New York City and New Jersey on September 18th passes as expected. Several U.S. senators from both sides of the aisle apparently want to make travelers live as a veritable hell of red tape and insidious surveillance by increasing punitive security for rail lines, highways, and marine routes by adding presence and screening procedures at mega bus depots, Amtrak stations, and more. As perpetually terrified as the U.S. Department of Homeland Security likes to keep the population, considering the TSA's phenomenally negative reputation at airports, passengers missing flights due to long lines, free molestations, confiscation of breast milk, and countless other good times. It is highly doubtful that proposed legislation will receive more than a tepid public support. Bloomberg report emphasis added, a bipartisan bill introduced Thursday by Senator John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, will require the TSA to use a risk-based security model for these transport modes and to budget money based on those risks. It will require a wider use of agency's terrorist watch list by train operators and more detailed passenger manifests along with tighter screening of marine employees. The legislation would also increase the TSA's canine use by many as 70 dog handler teams for surface transportation. Despite the blatant Aurelian overtone, Senate sponsors insist that the American public don't get ruffled feathers because trust them is not all you think. Not all what you think. This is very much not creating for bus or rail transportation the security model that exists for aviation, asserted spokesman for the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, Frederick Hill, as quoted by Bloomberg. Hill's statements considering its ill-reputed TSA has literally never captured a single terrorist. It's debatably a good or terrible thing, though adding a mandatory background screening to board a megabus intimates the latter. Besides the non-fatal bombs detonated and discovered in areas around New York City and New Jersey, the senator cited the DHS Office of Inspector General recent reports surrounding alarm bells over the lack of security in, well, every other system of transport in the United States besides aviation, which the TSA obviously already makes unbearable. Without a hint of irony, the OIG notes DHS is responsible for securing all forms of transport in the nation to ensure the freedom of movement for people and commerce, while noting 8% of its 2015 budget went towards aviation programs and just 2% of non-aviation transportation system. Auditors found budgetary allocations issues regarding security and risk needing to be remedied, and lawmaker sponsors and TSA agrees. If the bill passes, it will grasp TSA's approach to assessing security risk and will help the agency better fulfill its role hub of analysis, planning, and information, Doom explained the statement. Upon a close inspection, however, the bill will do little more than create more extensive secondary domestic surveillance networks. For years, investigations of the TSA have revealed innumerable issues, from at least, but not the least, of which is culture of fear among agents who might otherwise expose more issues of supervisory retaliation. No one who reports the issue is safe at TSA. Mark Livingston, who worked for the TSA Chief Risk Officer, told Congress in April, as quoted by NorthJersey.com, I am concerned that TSA employees responsible for transportation security, intelligence, and analysis fear their supervisors more than they fear a potential terrorist threat. Moreover, the agency's airport ubiquity hasn't been bereft of glaring security mistakes and practices antithetical to the safety their presence ostensibly guarantees. Agents, for example, laughably claims our water bottles, soda cans, and yes, even breast milk containers and pimento cheese pose a insurmountable risk to passengers and safety must be handed over prior to entering the terminal. But confiscated material sits in the fill to the brim bins in screening areas. If all those beverages containers somehow actually did contain, say, explosive material, the TSA would be responsible for building a bomb of epic proportions. More to the point, TSA agents tested by DHS auditors last year more than flunked the test. Weapons and fake explosives were allowed to pass 95% of the time, 60 to 70% of individuals' attempts. Um, inordinately long lines at airport security checkpoints in the spring piqued travelers' anger and forced the question, is the TSA necessary at all? In the name of safety and security, or more accurately, under the promise of terrorism, America had been groped, x-rayed, fondled, detained, robbed, searched, brutalized, sexually assaulted, and generally humiliated by state agents in a nation where a person is 58 times more likely to be killed by an officer of the law than by a terrorist. With a host of problems still plaguing the TSA, the only possible motive for such a vast extension of its powers would have to be keeping better tabs on civilians. The Big Brother approach to national security, though proven flawed continually, even in the placement and detonation of non-fatal bombs cited as motivation for the bill, will echo into our private lives until we have nowhere to go, nowhere to escape its eyes, until we collectively stop allowing the fear to guide our most important privacy concerns. Government agencies will test how much we'll give, but they will never stop trying to take. Absolutely. More Big Brother garbage as usual. And the truth of the matter is, my friends, it's nothing more than a monumental deception. And they call us the conspiracy kooks, right? Now they knew we were correct. How pathetic some folks are. Well, and the truth of the matter is, in doing this in other places, it's going to hurt those areas. And you know what? I think the county sheriffs, your county sheriff, to tell them to get the hell off their depots, their trains, their bus stations. All right, instead of going, okay, boss, because they are the most powerful elected servant in the municipality level. So do that, exercise the 10th Amendment, and even at the state level, they should tell them to butt out. All right. Next one here actually came from the 10th Amendment Center. It came out, actually today, it came out, it is by J.P. Cortez. It says, resurrecting gold clause contracts at the state level, a tool to undermine the Fed. It says here, gold clause contracts provide an avenue for states to promote and the use and acceptance of gold and silver and undermine the Fed's monopoly on money. Assuming you had the money, would you loan $10,000 to be paid back over 30 years plus 3% interest? What if inflation skyrocketed? That would be the benefit the borrower and the deeply harm you as a lender. Even if you repaid, the declining value of those repayments wouldn't come close to making up for the loss in purchasing power. Given that today rates inflation are generally higher than interest rates, agreeing to be paid at a fixed rate over a longer period of time is a risky proposition. The purchasing power of the Federal Reserve note has already fallen drastically since its last link to gold was severed in 1971. And in the coming decades, America's currency will surely continue to depreciate, possibility at an even faster rate. One way to reduce the uncertainty facing both parties who enter into long-term financial arrangements is to employ what is called the gold clause contract. This tool gives creditors and borrowers alike a significant degree of insulation from currency risk, including both inflation and deflation. Simply put, a gold clause contract is a contract which explicitly specifies payment in gold or silver or both, and therefore can only be satisfied by such payment. The gold clause contract used to be common in the United States. That until President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president that ushered in the new era of socialism, spent a massive amount of money in the 1930s in an attempt to stimulate the country out of the Great Depression. Even with printed money and the tax hikes that he enacted, he still needed more cash. Yep. So they call him a great man, right? Pathetic. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 required that every Federal Reserve note printed had to be backed by 40% of gold owned by the federal government. When Roosevelt wanted to print more money to prop falling asset prices, his solution to his problem of gold backing requirement was simple: expirate the gold in a banned private possession and required to be handed over in exchange for paper money. Yes, extortion. He was an extortionist slime bag. If the government obtained the public gold, it could print many more currency units, and he issued Executive Order 6102 in 1933. The possession of more than 5 ounces of gold became illegal. Yep, he supported victimless crime laws, and Congress followed up with a joint resolution removing federal court jurisdictions to enforce gold clauses in contracts. This heinous executive order stood until President Ford signed a bill in 1974 that legalized gold ownership and allowed federal court enforcement of gold clause contracts. Well, even though you talk about Gerald Ford, but at least he had a conscience on that area. Why gold clause contracts? As we discussed above, long-term agreements with a Federal Reserve note is a chosen medium of exchange, leave one party deeply vulnerable to currency debasement, and theoretically, a borrower could be harmed by deflation, in which the Federal Reserve note increased in value. However, deflation is extremely unlikely to be allowed because central banks suffer from aphtharsomophobia. Hopefully I pronounced that correct. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Or an intense fear of deflation. Therefore, inflation and currency debasement is a predictable path, particularly as we head towards a financial crisis of the likes of which have been since not have been since the Great Depression. Today, inflation escalation clauses are sometimes included in contracts. Financially savvy people know that it is almost certain that the Federal Reserve note will continue to lose its purchasing power in the long term, so it makes sense to include a clause as a way of adjusting for varying degrees of inflation, but no one really knows how extreme inflation will get. That's largely dependent on the actions of politicians in Congress and policymakers on the Federal Reserve Board. Accordingly, inflation escalation clauses, which predetermine the annual increase, are entirely arbitrary and do not provide much protection. Gold clause contracts, in a way, release people from the chains bound upon them by legal tender laws, explicitly naming the manner in which one wishes to be paid. The contract is free from the restrictions that come with and having to accept Federal Reserve notes, commonly referred to as dollars, for repayment for debts per Title 31 U.S. United States Code Section 5118. A gold clause contract is perfectly legal. That said, there are a few nuisances that go into drafting effective clauses. However, there is information readily available. Gold clause contracts can find a foothold in the financial lives of many citizens and eventually become adopted more widely in the economy. Edwin Vieira Jr. writes, enough people in particular area did begin to employ gold clause contracts on a routine basis. The relentless force of competition will drive the economy in that area away from depreciating paper currency. Through the adoption and the use of gold clause contracts comes adoption and the use of gold and silver as a medium of exchange. The deficiencies of paper will be made abundantly clear when compared side to side with real money. Why states should embrace gold clause contracts. The 1930s was trying time for economic liberty, where the government, both state and federal, ran amok. In 1934, the contract clause was all but eliminated in Home Building Loan Association in Blisdale. The Supreme Court said that states can change the terms of contracts in an effort to combat tough economic times. In 1935, after signing President Roosevelt's contemptible gold expiration order, the Supreme Court ruled on 4 cases that can be known as the gold clause cases. These 4 cases came into the Supreme Court as challenges to invalidate gold clauses in contracts. The Supreme Court released a decision for all 4 cases on the same day, and all 4 rulings share the same holding. Sanctity of contracts is the empty platitude. If the contract says something government bureaucrats don't like, courts can refuse to enforce them, effectively invalidating them. Unlike in Fletcher versus Peck, where the court held that Georgia could not validate contracts, the Supreme Court ruled that Congress' power to regulate was a plenary power, meaning it had the supreme power in this area. Gold Clause contracts, the Supreme Court said, jeopardize contracts' efforts to control the monetary system. On that state level, there are the steps that can be taken to ensure the widespread acceptance of Gold Clause contracts. This is as simple as making sure that enforcement mechanisms are applied to help the private parties that choose to use these contracts. In both Bryan versus Rose and Bryan versus Horowitz, the court reached the same decision. A specific performance clause explicitly naming a method of payment cannot be substituted for another legal tender. This means if a contract calls for a repayment in gold and silver, or even prescribes specific forms such as Canadian gold maple leaf 1 ounce coins, the reserve note dollars are not a suitable surrogate. A guarantee of specific performance is crucial to the reliability of the Gold Clause contracts. Now it is time for states to encourage good Gold Clause contracts by enacting legislation which requires the state courts to give them full effect and enforceability. But the first state that does this will benefit by attracting new business from all over the nation. With money turbulence and the danger of inflation increasing by the days, citizens and businesses need greater ability to use gold and silver to protect themselves. And that is true. And the truth of the matter is, even Article 1, Section 10 talks about gold and silver coins. Article 1, Section 8 regulate money, and of course, which is gold and silver. And I think Article 1, Section 10, states can use money to make money, but only gold and silver coins. So, yeah, it is important, and I do have to support it and get the feds out, because they are an illegal entity. And I always say too, that plus someone, the president or someone should need to implement Executive Order 11,110 that John F. Kennedy said about the Treasury could manage the money, and took the Federal Reserve out. So that's probably one of the reasons why he got shot. That's what people say. So it's a good thing. Exercise it. You should go to your state folks. Send this to them. Make them really think what's going on. Okay, give them that rundown about the money situation. All right, my friends, we got like one more here, and let me just check this out. Ooh. Absolutely. All right. Yeah, so final thing now, it just came from The Guardian. It came out today, to be exact. So, yeah, it came out today. So, I'm going to just check this baby out. It's entitled, Washington Post is Wrong, Edward Snowden Should Be Pardoned, by Trevor Tim. As he wrote, with the launch of Oliver Stone's Snowden film this past weekend came a renewed push for the pardon for Eric Snowden from the world's leading human rights organizations. But predictably, not everyone agreed that he should be pardoned. On Saturday, the Washington Post editorial board deplorably editorialized against it, despite its own papers winning the Pulitzer Prize for reporting of his leaked documents. Bernie Sanders, Daniel Ellsberg, former members of the NSA, and more weighed on whether Obama should grant clemency to the divisive whistleblower. They joined many of his other detractors in making old and factually incorrect arguments about what Snowden actually did. As the moment demanding his exoneration grows, nonetheless, here are 5 common misconceptions about the whistleblower and why they are wrong. Snowden did not take 1.5 million documents and dump them en masse on the internet. Snowden critics love to pretend that everything the public learned from his disclosures was solely because he chose to release the information. In reality, the number of documents that Snowden published himself is zero. Instead of dumping a mass of documents on the internet, he gave them to experienced national security reporters who worked at some of the most respected news outlets in the country. He relied on their judgments about what was in the public interest, and those reporters allowed the government to make objectives, some of which they listened to, tied to national security concerns. The Washington Post claimed, as others have in the past, that Snowden copied and kept 1.5 million classified documents. Snowden's lawyer, Ben Wisner, has called the number absurd and made up. Even the former NSA director himself admitted that the 1.5 million number only represented documents that Snowden touched, and officials didn't know how many he actually took. The real number is likely at least an order of magnitude lower, according to public comments by the journalists involved, which the Post editorial board could not have found out if they had bothered to ask their own colleagues. There is no evidence Snowden harms national security. House Intelligence Committee published an riddled report on Snowden's last week, making vague claims about damage to national security and a naked attempt to counter the narrative in Oliver Stone's movie. Three-time Pulitzer Prize winner Barton Gellman dismantled the whole report point by point on his blog. We know the U.S. government makes all sorts of dire predictions when information is leaked to the press. The Pentagon Papers, the Chelsea Manning disclosures, and the release of the torture report, to name a few cases, and is always caught exaggerating. The Snowden disclosures are no exception, as the Washington Post reported 2 years ago. Technical options for people who want to get in touch with journalists in a way that protects both security and anonymity. The director of the National Intelligence, James Clapper, has said repeatedly in public that the leaks did great damage, but in private he has taken a more nuanced stance. A review of early damage assessments in previous espionage cases, he said in one closed-door briefing this fall, found that dire forecasts of harm was seldom borne out. The House Intelligence Committee did not point to a single concrete example of how national security was harmed solely by Snowden's disclosures. Snowden could not get through the proper channels to blow the whistle. The idea is not a whistleblower because he didn't go through the internal government channels to make his claim is absurd on two fronts. First, at the time Snowden gave his material to The Guardian and Washington Post, he was a government contractor, and contractors were exempt from most whistleblowers' protections given to national security employees. PolitiFact called Hillary's statement that he had access to whistleblowers' protections mostly false. But this argument is a red herring anyway. Snowden was not blowing the whistle on some rogue NSA agent or program that only a handful of people knew about. These mass surveillance programs, later ruled illegal, were approved at the highest levels of the executive branch and by the FISA court. Snowden would have essentially been telling his superiors, who already knew about them and were tasked to carry them out, that they themselves were breaking the law. Interesting there, right? Snowden did not flee to Russia and has regularly criticized Russia's human rights record. This is persistent yet false accusation that since Snowden is in exile in Russia, he fled there and has cooperated with the Russian government. In other words of the Post editorial, Mr. Snowden hurt his own credibility as an avatar of freedom by accepting asylum by Russia's Vladimir Putin. This is false. The only reason he's in Russia is because the U.S. government canceled his passport and he was transiting through the Russian airport to Latin America. He was marooned there against his will. Everyone, including Snowden himself, wishes if he wasn't in Russia, but the alternative is being thrown in the maximum security prison in the United States. At least right now, he's free to participate in the international debate virtually. Snowden has harshly criticized Russia's human rights and civil liberties records so many times at this point that it is hard to count out, including 2014 and op-ed for The Guardian. Snowden's condemnation has been so strong that the former U.S. ambassador to Russia and Snowden critic Michael McFaul recently tweeted at Snowden makes a stronger statement about human rights regression in Russia than anything else I ever said as ambassador. Wow. He cannot make this case to a jury in what the Post called the best traditional civil disobedience. In a perfect world, Snowden could come home to tell his story to a jury, as many of his critics said he should. However, this belies a fundamental misunderstanding of the law Snowden is charged under, the Espionage Act, a First World War era statute meant for spies, not whistleblowers who gave information to the press, does not allow for public interest defense. Snowden would literally not be allowed to tell the jury his motive for leaking the information, describing the benefits of the disclosures, or discuss their lack of harm to national security. The most famous whistleblower in history, Daniel Ellsberg, has made this point repeatedly, is on record as saying that Snowden was right to leave the country so he could continue to participate in the public debate around his disclosure. And he just sits as the board of directors for the Freedom of the Press Foundation. So, I haven't seen the movie yet, but the whole thing is he always got the media. They call him a traitor, people call him a hero. I say this, the person, he just put out enough information to let people know what's going on. So technically what we know, even as conspiracy theorists and researchers and questionnaire and critical thinkers, he just verified what's going on. And so, but this 1.5 million is to completely exaggerate. But it was going to have people want to make things more dramatic and accurate. But I believe Snowden should be pardoned, and many others, doesn't matter what side of the platform you're on politically. But activists and podcasters, a lot of us agree. Most of us agree that he should be pardoned. He can't be charged for espionage because, like they said here, he wasn't a spy. Plain and simple. So you know what I say? I haven't seen the movie yet, so I can't make any judgment. But I'm not gonna praise him as some Lord and Savior. But he did what was right, and you gotta give that man homage, like him or not. And that is really it, my friends. Thanks for listening. Plus, feel free to share this to your social media networks. I know I just did like a brain stance there. Yeah, sorry about that. If you have any questions, comments, or criticism, doesn't matter. Whatever you do, please send it with decorum. Furthermore, if you want to send me something that's interesting that I haven't talked about, that'd be great. You can hit me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Tumblr, YouTube, Freedoms Network, and Scene.life. Or you can email me at LokiLuck3. It's all together, LokiLuck with the number 3 at gmail.com. Well, before I go, I want to dedicate this to all the tyrants out there and to the big hype and hoopla of the evangelical political debates or presidential campaigns and beyond. To all those folks that claim to be their something, but they're really demons inside, or tyrants. A band called Halloween, entitled Judas. And it came out, I think, around 87, if I'm correct. It was from the original 12-inch mix. Hopefully you enjoy it. Okay, my friends? Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that the demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading the love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.